Welcome to Hampton Roads Business Live. In this episode, we're going to be speaking with James Zobel, the historian for the MacArthur Memorial in downtown Norfolk. How you doing, James?
Everything's great.
Thanks for coming by. Let's start off with, I think, it would be a good question, is what is the MacArthur Memorial?
Well, it's the final resting place of General of the Army Douglas MacArthur, and it's comprised of a three-building complex in the MacArthur Square, which is right downtown. The main museum and the crypt where the general and his wife are buried is the old City Hall of Norfolk, which was built in 1850. The dome on top is similar to the one in Washington because Thomas U. Walter, the designer of both of them, was the one who put it together. So that's always been like the landmark of the MacArthur Memorial. But now we also have a brand new visitor center, which has a high-definition theater, a brand new gift shop, enlarged exhibit space, and then of course there's the research center where I work, and that's where the archives, library, and the education departments are located.
Okay, and you're right next to MacArthur Mall.
Yes, we're right across from the mall and right next to the new MacArthur Station where the light rail rolls into.
Okay, and you can actually park right there in the mall and walk across the street, and there it is. So it's pretty convenient. Okay. Tell us a little bit, for people who don't know or aren't that familiar with General MacArthur. Who was he, and what kind of in history, what's his importance?
He's probably one of the greatest and most controversial generals that the United States has ever had. He graduated #1 in his class at West Point. He was the first captain of the Corps Cadets, youngest brigadier general for America in World War I, went on to be the youngest superintendent of West Point, youngest major general at his time, youngest chief of staff of the Army, architect of victory in World War II, overseer of the occupation of Japan after World War II, and then met his tragic, end of his career in the Korean War. But he's a person who gave 52 years of service to the United States, and his legacy continues.
Right. Now, he was very instrumental in rebuilding Japan.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and the Japanese people actually loved him, which I
Yes.
always thought that was kind of weird, but I guess as I had read a little bit more about it, is that he did a lot of things that I can see where the people really liked him.
Well, when he first went in there, the mission of the United States, unlike in Iraq and Afghanistan, no money was to go in to rebuild Japan. All the food that was going in, all the funds that were going were just for the use of the occupation forces. That first winter, it was estimated that millions of Japanese would die from starvation as well as sickness if something wasn't done about it. So MacArthur violated his orders, opened the food stocks, went on a public health campaign. I think the Japanese realized then that the Americans, the Allies, weren't there to exterminate them. They were actually there to give them that hand back up into the community of nations. I think that episode really sealed it for the Japanese and MacArthur.
Right. Well, that's what I found is that, and matter of fact, I remember in the film, they were singing "Happy Birthday" to him, all the kids and everything.
70th birthday, very famous episode.
Yeah. All right. So one of the questions I have here is, why was the city of Norfolk chosen for the memorial? I've had people ask me that because they say, well, what's to, people visiting say, what's to see? I say, well, there's the naval base, and you've got the Marine Science Museum and all that, and MacArthur Memorial. And they say, why? Why Norfolk? Because he wasn't Navy.
Right.
What was going?
5-star general in a Navy town.
Right.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
they go, that doesn't match up. And so I say, I don't know. So
well,
ask you.
After MacArthur's mother was from Norfolk, and he used to visit the place as a boy. And his mother was married to his father, who was also a very famous general in American history. One of his brothers was born in Norfolk. And in 1951, after MacArthur was fired by Truman, all the cities around the country were saying, come to our city and we'll give you a parade. And Norfolk said, come to Norfolk and we'll dedicate a park to your mom. Oh. So that got him. Mm-hmm. He was given a speech at the old Monticello Hotel after the dedication of this park on the site where his mom's old house was in the Berkeley section in Norfolk. And he stopped right in the middle of it and he said, I feel like I've finally come home. And Mayor Duckworth was there and pretty much was, you're mine now, boy, because he saw the sentiment that was with the general. And then in '60, they approached him about having a museum with all of his artifacts, a place with all of his papers there. And MacArthur said, well, if you let me be buried there with my wife, I'll go for the deal. And so that's how it was cemented that it was a memorial rather than a museum.
So his wife is buried there with him?
Yes, Jean
Right.
MacArthur lived to be 101, lived in 3 centuries, and when she died in 2000, we buried her on General MacArthur's birthday, January 26th.
Okay. And now how long has the memorial been there?
This is our 50th anniversary coming up in January.
So you have a celebration coming
in
up.
64, when they opened the doors, it was on the General's birthday. He was still alive. And he was actually going to come Memorial Day to dedicate this place. I mean, it's pretty rare to be alive when you have a memorial dedicated in your honor. But he said he'd be there alive or dead. And he went into very bad sickness, early 64, went into a coma, and then died on April 5th. And they brought him to the memorial. And like he said, he was there to dedicate it alive or dead. And so when they had the official opening in May, he was already buried there.
So who funds this memorial?
Well, the city of Norfolk runs the memorial. It was a deal that was signed with the general for the deed of gift, giving all his materials to Norfolk. They run the infrastructure, they pay the staff. There is a separate foundation, the General Douglas MacArthur Foundation, that supports the memorial in all the endeavors they do. So we're really in a very good position. We don't take state funds or federal funds. So whereas a lot of the museums and other places have had to close down because of sequester or the lack of funds, we've been pretty lucky just to have that partnership between the city of Norfolk and the General Douglas MacArthur Foundation.
I imagine you have a lot of school visits and things like that, or
All the time, yes.
all the time. And so about how many visitors does the memorial get a year?
Right now we're running at about 40,000 a year. Education in the archives program adds to that. There's a lot of outreach that's done to the local schools. We're looking to get into national outreach here pretty soon with the education program. So the numbers when it first opened were just massive. You know, now we're got the problem. A lot of the veterans who know MacArthur are passing on, and we're starting to look into really making education the foremost part of our activity, just to try to keep the school kids coming in.
Well, it's really a good educational experience just to walk through there.
Well,
I mean, you can follow the whole war and through his career.
Yeah,
I mean,
the whole progression of late 19th, early 20th century, and as well when we redid the exhibits in '99, we put within all of them elements of the standards of learning that the high schools, middle schools, elementary schools use. So that way, no matter what group comes through, they're going to find something in there that has something to do with the programs they're doing back at school.
Right, okay. Well, it is very interesting, and you've got a ton of artifacts and things that very interesting to see, and some quite expensive things from, I know you got the vases and all that stuff. But
it makes you wonder when they made the rule you couldn't accept gifts from foreign governments.
Yeah, it's some pretty gifts. Okay, and you also have a car and a motorcycle and all too recently. That was brought in?
Well, the car was donated originally when the museum opened back in '64. And what it was MacArthur's limousine that he used during his time in Japan, and then afterward, during his retirement years. And that was brought down. It's always been it's definitely the biggest artifact that we have in our collection. The Harley-Davidson World War II edition was donated a few years ago by a local Harley dealer who wanted to make a contribution.
Now that brings up something. I know that occasionally you get film and things like that donated, but what do you just hear from people who say, you know, my father served with MacArthur or something, and I have this, well, I'd like to donate this?
There is a lot of that, especially with the veterans of Korean War, World War II passing on. The families want a place that they know it's going to be preserved, taken care of. They know our reputation, so a lot of them donate it. With the advent of the internet in the mid-90s, we've been able to use this as a tool to really hunt down people that we know were associated with MacArthur. We can find their families. Yeah, for artifacts, documents, because in the archives that I run, we're an international research center. And what it is we have 4,000 or so requests every year for information because of the massive volume, 2 million documents, 100,000 photographs, 500 films, newspapers, everything you'd expect.
Do you have
to be in
researchers that come in there?
Oh yes, nonstop, yeah, constantly. And so people know that we're going to preserve it, people are going to use it, and so when we go to hunt down these people, these families that have artifacts or papers, that's what we really want, is try to enhance the continued learning capabilities of the memorial.
Okay. And another question that I had here was, what kind of services does the memorial provide? Now, I know that I was just going to ask you about that, and you just mentioned that you are a resource for all these people doing research, and of course you're also an educational resource for schools and the community.
Yes, and we throw a lot of special programs throughout the year that take place down at the memorial: book signings, film screenings, symposiums of international historians. So there's always something going down along with the education as well as the archival departments.
Right. Okay, and another question here was, what's on the horizon for the memorial? And I know that I kind of spoke to you a little beforehand, so you got some big events coming up.
Well, the 50th anniversary, we're hoping to have a big event in January. And then this year, 2014, will be the centennial of World War I. We have a lot of activities that are on our plate for that. We're working on an education program of films that can be used at high schools, middle schools, that will discuss the various elements of the First World War and adhere to the SOLs once again. We're going to be hosting symposiums, like we talked about, with historians coming to talk about World War I. And then at the same time, it's going to be the 75th anniversary of World War II. So is a lot on the horizon coming up.
A lot of things going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so that means an awful lot more visitors to Hampton Roads.
Yes.
You get a lot of out-of-town people.
Yeah,
obviously.
I think in the past 50 years, we've brought 4 million people through the doors of the MacArthur Memorial.
That's great for the economy, too.
And that's what the city of Norfolk really likes.
That's
That's what our job is to make them very happy.
Well, good. I assume they are happy, and I've seen the expansion. Very pretty.
Well, it shows how
well
the partnership of the foundation and the city works, because they both put into getting this brand new face for the memorial built.
Right. Well, if you haven't been to see the new expansion, I encourage you to go. And I know as a resident, sometimes we don't take advantage of some of the things that are in the area. But you ought to take a look at the MacArthur Memorial. It does have a facelift there on it, but they've got some great new exhibits and some activities coming up that sound very interesting.
And just ask for me. I'd be glad to show anybody around.
No, there you go. A personal tour. How about that? So thanks, James, for coming in. And once again, the link to the memorial's website is at the bottom of the page, and if you find yourself with an hour or a couple hours to kill and want to do something really interesting, go down to the MacArthur Mall and walk across the street to the memorial. Thanks, James.
Thank you.